Did you just throw your phone?
No, I did not throw the phone.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Beg Pardon. As always, I'm your host Anthony, joined by Carlos, and welcome to the show. How's it going, Carlos?
That's a solid question. If you listen to last episode, you know I was laid off from the Dream Company, or for me anyway it is, and I'm still processing that. So, like, it's weird. It's a very surreal feeling because part of you wants to wake up and be like, that didn't happen. Like, I'm gonna go back. It's a joke. Yeah, but it's a real surreal feeling. But I'll tell you what, all 2020 was missing was a Thanos snap, and by damn did we just get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 2020, man. This is gonna go down in the books. Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
Like, we all joked around about, like, 2016, or I kept on thinking, I was like, 2012 was bad. 2013 is going to be my year. Then I was like, 2014, it got real rough. 2015, it's like every year I'm like,
Well, 2012, they even made that movie, remember?
Yeah.
For, like, the world. Let's see the 2020
like,
movie they come out with.
Yeah, that's appropriate for, like, right now. So today in our Hall of History episode, we are covering the dynamic duos that we talked about in our previous episode. If you guys haven't listened to it, the link for that particular episode will be in the description box below. But your duo that you chose was Walt and Roy, yeah? Disney.
Yep.
For those of you that
Disney, that is.
Yeah. Disney if you're nasty. And I chose SpongeBob Squarepants and Patrick Star from SpongeBob Squarepants, the Nickelodeon.
Starring Patrick Star.
Right, yeah. SquarePants if you're nasty. So I'll start. So back in, I think it was so the first, the show debuted May 1st, 1999, and it's still going right now. Right? You wouldn't think that I didn't think that it was that old.
I thought it was like early 2000s. I didn't think it was 99 though.
Yeah, May 1st, 1999. And it was created by Steven Hillenburg. I want to make sure I pronounce that right. Steven Hillenburg, who is actually like a marine biologist. And yeah, so he went to school for that and I think like animation or like art. And he was like, I don't know where I want to go. I don't know like really what I want to do. And he got a job at the in Dana Point, California, at the Ocean Institute. And they like charged him with like education kind of. So for like teenagers and people that visited, he then created like a series called the Intertidal Zone. Intertidal Zone. With like the narrator and the announcer being that sponge. And that's what like educated the children, but not with like the voice and all that, like it was literally like a sponge. And like a sea sponge, not like a sponge in your kitchen that SpongeBob
like
actually became. Yeah, that SpongeBob actually is. So they're like, okay, like this is fun, whatever. And then he went back to school, art school, and was like, I want to draw, I want to animate, I want to do cartoons. And he went to a festival that he could like debut his work at. Mm-hmm. And at the festival, he met one of the execs at Nickelodeon who was like super impressed with him, and he was like, wow, like I want to hire you to like work with me. And he was like, all right, like I guess
if you say so.
Like that, it kind of changes that whole like trajectory of what you thought everything was going to be. So that was back, I think, in like 1990 or like early 90s. And the gentleman from Nickelodeon, he was Joe Murray. and he was the creator of Rocko's Modern Life, which then became like a pretty big
Um,
show. Yeah, a pretty big show. I remember watching that
yeah,
show. Yeah.
it's on
Um,
Netflix. Even did like a reboot on Netflix.
yeah. So they hired Steve Hillenburg onto that show, and he was hired as the creative director for Rocko's Modern Life, and he served the whole time. And after Rocko's Modern Life ended, he was like, I really want to do something. And he came out
Mm.
with like Sponge Boy, because it went back to the days of him doing the thing. And
Yeah.
then they found out, like, he pitched it to Nickelodeon, and the execs like loved it, like loved it. But then they found out Sponge Boy was like already copyright, like taken from like an actual company, like a mop company.
What are the odds?
Yeah, so they were like, can't do that. And he knew that, so he had to come up with a different title. And he was like, man, I know I'm gonna have to come up with something that has the word sponge in it, so people don't mistake him for like cheese pants, because he kind of looks like a block of cheddar cheese. Like you,
Yeah,
he didn't
that's
want,
fair.
yeah, he didn't want anything. So then SpongeBob, and then Tom Kenny, who voices SpongeBob SquarePants, whenever he was like, the name really stuck whenever he saw like a rendering of it, and he was like, look at that sponge and look at him in his square pants, and that's
They were like, by God.
yeah, I'll be damned.
Yeah.
But what was cool is all of these creatives that worked on this show together, they had worked on Rocko's Modern Life together, and they were like, he basically got to like hand select his team, and everyone in all the interviews and all the articles that I combed through, everyone had the same thing to say about the creator of SpongeBob SquarePants, saying that like, whenever you have a creator who's so like, he was so set on a vision, like nobody was like afraid. Like he knew, like Tom Kenny, he was like, I know I want him in the show. Like I know I want him voicing the title character. And Nickelodeon, they wanted like
Mhm.
a celebrity voice because it would help like market the show. And he was like, no.
Yeah.
And then at the time, back then, everything that was geared towards children that was successful was like children or adolescents in school. If you really think about it, think about our childhood, everything we watched, like everyone was like in school for the most part. That was geared to like the
Yeah.
7 to 11 year old demographic, and they were like, he needs to be in school. And the story goes that Steve Hellenberg threatened to like just walk out. He was like, no, I'm not doing it. He's a grown man. I refuse to do it. So then
He's a grown man.
they settled on they settled on him being in boat school to learn how to drive, and that's how the Mrs.
Mhm.
Puff character was created. And that's been like an arc of his character, this entire of SpongeBob's character, this entire time
Yeah.
was him being in school. So they settled on that, and he was like, I'm glad. And for those of you that don't know, I mean, Steve Helmberg served as the show executive producer all the way until 2018, whenever he died, and he served that whole entire time.
Spoiler alert, he died. I thought you were going to say
Yeah,
until he was let go, or. I
no,
mean,
he died.
ultimately, he was let go.
Yeah, yeah, the ultimate release.
Yeah. Oh, my God. That's
Yeah.
crazy, though, because, I mean, Mrs. Puff, other than Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy,
Hmm.
Mrs. Puff is like my favorite. Every time she was like, SpongeBob, why? When she would like blow up.
Right. But he was motivated by like buddy comedies. So like back then, if you remember, Ren and Stimpy was like huge.
Mm-hmm.
So Ren and Stimpy, even Rocco's Modern Life. I mean, there was Rocco and
Yep.
Heffa.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, the Two Angry Beavers. It were buddy.
I love
Everything
Angry
was buddy.
Beavers.
Yeah, everything was like buddy comedies, and
Yeah.
that was like his in. And he was like, I want to do that. Specifically about the character. So SpongeBob, again, I said, is voiced by Tom Kenny. Tom Kenny also voices countless characters in the show,
Yeah.
and outside of the show too. In like Powerpuff Girls. I mean, he's done like, I don't even have a list, literally.
He's done
Yeah,
probably
he's
over
like
50 characters.
yeah, he's like one of the most prolific like voice actors
Yeah.
ever. But he also portrays Patchy the Pirate in all the film versions of SpongeBob, like
I
how
knew
he's
that.
always like
Yeah.
having the watching parties and stuff like that. That's actually him. The actual voice for SpongeBob was a minor character in Rocco's Modern Life. like an actual person, and it was voiced by Tom Kenny, and that's how Steve Hillenburg knew that I want this individual. And Tom Kenny forgot how to like do the voice until Steve like had a recording of it and like kept playing it back to him, and then he got it, and then he got it back. But just like that one character, and that reminds me of that conversation that we had. Like, yes, it was funny back a couple years ago where I was like, man, this cartoon, like Carlos, like there's a cartoon called Invader Zim where they were riding this pig across the water, and this girl was like crying, and he slaps her in the face, like that. Those like pivotal moments that you remember decades and decades later. I mean, for them it wasn't decades later; it was just a couple years. But Steve Hillenburg knew. He was like, that's the voice. Whenever I'm thinking about the show I'm creating, like he's like, fuck, 5 years ago, this was the voice that would be for that character. So I thought that was really cool. Like to really dig back in your mind and be like, that stuck with me.
Well, that's also like for him to hear that voice and be like, oh, I remember how I did that. I think that's a testament to him as a voice actor. Because Mel Blanc, who did the voice of all the Looney Tunes characters, a similar thing with him. He got into a vicious car accident, and he was in a coma for a while. And they said that like he wasn't answering in the coma, but like the doctor. I said doc as a bugs. The doctor was like, he was like calling the character names. He was like, Bugs, are you in there? And like Mel Blanc did the voice, and like that's what pulled him out of the coma, was like his mind flipping into all these voices. Is that a real story?
Is this true?
Yeah, it was a true story. There's a documentary called I Know That Voice, and it's all about voice actors. If you want to check it out, I Know That Voice. And Mel Blanc's son tells that story in the documentary, and he's like, that's what saved my dad's life.
Wow. But he, ironically too, SpongeBob was named the favorite TV character in like 2012 by then President Barack Obama. He was like, that is my favorite TV character. It was SpongeBob. Yeah. I was like, out of all of them?
Like, all right, I guess.
Yeah. And he said he used to watch it with his daughters a lot. So there's like sentimental
That's fair.
To it.
Yeah.
SpongeBob was also like, and we talked about this, not in another episode, but we were like, yeah, once you get a balloon, but he's been in the Macy's Thanksgiving parade since 2004 without fail. So once you hit that like precipice, you're like,
he's a headliner.
And he was the first fictional character ever to be debuted in Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. First fictional character.
Really?
Yeah.
Which one? Which Wax Museum? Do you know?
I think New York. I think in New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so weird. He must be small though. Like he's got to be like 2 feet or like.
Well, yeah. Is it life size?
If it's life size, it's even smaller. He's got to be like this water bottle.
Right. Like.
Yeah, that's also been reduced. If you notice, for those of you watching, it's a smaller bottle. Times are tough.
I was like, where are you gonna go with that? Patrick is voiced by Bill. I feel like I'm gonna mess up his name, like Fagerbach? Question mark. But he also voices tons of other characters in the show itself. In SpongeBob himself, and he's actually getting his own talk show called the Patrick Star Show. That's as of 2020. Yeah, that's like as of like now. It's in development. Like the first 7 episodes right now are like still in development. But I was like, oh my god, that's like that's absolutely incredible. But one of the reasons why I chose them too was like, so first off, both I think it's called Help Wanted was the very first episode that came out May 1st, 1999. Both characters debuted in that episode, and they've been featured obviously like ever since. What I kind of liked about them was they were always best friends. Like they were just best friends, always doing things together. They had kind of like this inseparable bond. Like going back to SpongeBob, you had somebody with literally unlimited optimism. You had somebody with like literally unlimited optimism, and to a fault, to where like he would see like the outcomes of potential situations, and he would only see the positive in them, or he thinks that people's behavior and personalities are much brighter than they really are, like Squidward. Like he really thinks Squidward really likes him. And
sad.
Right? And then other than like a handful of episodes, he really doesn't. There are the one-off episodes where they do have like a shared bond, and like the one, remember whenever
Yeah.
he was like gonna blow up,
I was just thinking that one
the
in my head when they
pie.
had the pies. I was
Yes.
literally just thinking that in my head, and then he's doing the countdown, and SpongeBob was like blowing the bubbles, and they were the bomb bubbles.
And he's like, yeah, he starts crying, and I'm not gonna imitate it. I was gonna imitate it, but you guys get the picture.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you have Patrick, who is like so portrayed as like super like dim-witted, and
Yeah.
like the Jedi of like doing nothing, like the master of nothing was like Patrick's big thing. Like he's unemployed the whole entire series. But he will, like, he's so loyal to SpongeBob, and SpongeBob, I mean, you could argue is like the little leader of their group or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, those were like the main reasons on why I chose them. I was like, and they played such a pivotal role in like my childhood too. Like
Hmm.
any time that I can go back to like a particular like funny moment, a particular, I don't know, any type of particular moment in time, like I can usually go back to that show and be like, oh, like I remember this episode, or like the chocolate episode. Like me and my brothers like love the episode where they're like selling chocolate bars. And then like
Oh
that
yeah.
late, remember she answers and she's like all dried up, and he is like, "Hey, young
Yeah.
lady, is your mother home?" And like I don't know why, but we always thought it was like so funny.
I remember that one.
They said too, and like I don't remember, I don't know if I put down like what year it was. I think it was like around maybe 2005, 2006 ish. If you remember, there was like a huge controversy around like SpongeBob and Patrick like being gay. That was like a big
I
thing,
vaguely
and
remember
people,
that.
yeah. So people were like, "Oh, like they're gay or whatever," and honestly, of all the things that I read, it really threw off the production team and the voice actors themselves. They're like, there's nothing in this show to point towards that.
Yeah. Other than they were friends.
Right, Tom Kenny said that if they hold hands in the episode, or if SpongeBob holds Patrick's hand, it's because he loves Patrick. Like as a human, as like a human being, like they're best friends.
Right.
Like why would they? And I have a quote for him too. Whenever he was pressed on it, he was like, "I don't think that this is a case of being a gay-friendly show. It's a human being-friendly show. Everyone is welcome."
Hmm.
And I was like, "That's good." Like whenever
Yeah.
you just had an honest, like, if anything, because then they had to talk about it, they made like the characters, like if you ask them about it, they're asexual characters. They have no, this is it's a
It's a
cartoon,
children's
like they're not,
show.
yeah, it's a children's show, sir.
Yeah.
So there's no like underlying, like there's a prolific like LGBT writer who wrote in a op-ed like that there's like all this like tension under like tension in the show, right? And I was like, in my head I was like, y'all motherfuckers like really want it, like you do, like you take something that's not even remotely there and you make it into
Yeah.
it.
Well,
But I
Bert and
thought it was
Ernie had the
really,
same thing
yeah. I think
for
they had it
years
worst. Yeah, I think they had it worse though, because I mean they're because like
because they're
you
roommates.
can't, yeah, and they like take baths together, and like you can't take like the adults in this country, like you just can't.
Yeah.
Again, they y'all motherfuckers just want it, like
Look at the
no matter.
filth. Like that's all I
Yeah,
only want to say.
yeah, yeah. I don't even know what else to say, but
Yeah.
like outside of that, I thought that was like a really good response to it. And it like just further solidified my like really liking the show and really liking the message that it did send.
No, it's a solid show. It's not educational to say the least. So if people are like, "Well, my kids didn't learn,"
I learned how to spell the word fun. They taught me.
all right. Well, it has some educational drive, but it
Learn how to
wasn't
be a
meant for that.
salesman.
It was
No.
yeah. Learn how to sell those chocolate bars that make you in elementary school. The damn
Uh-huh.
book fairs.
There's and I'll be damned if I wouldn't like eat them and then have to pay for them myself, like the crisp ones. I couldn't help it. My dad would take them to work, and I'd just pray to God no one would want them.
It's the equivalent of don't get high on your own supply.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd just be fiending in my room.
But yeah, SpongeBob. it wasn't meant to be an educational show. It wasn't created for that reason. It wasn't created
No.
to be a representation for anyone. So like nobody can say like, well, it was created and these characters were supposed to be. It wasn't representation in mind at that time. Again,
Correct.
1999, no one was thinking representation in anything, really. Out of
No.
10 cartoons that were made, maybe 2 had a representation in the sense of like Elisa Maza was Native American and an African American in Gargoyles.
Yeah. Let
That
alone
was
gay
purposeful.
people. I mean,
Yeah.
Ellen had just came out on her TV show and then was like outcast
Quickly
like
lost.
a couple
Yeah,
months
quickly
later.
lost
Yeah.
that TV show.
Yeah.
So I don't think they went into, like you said, they started in the mid '90s talking about this show. I don't think the
Probably
intentions
like
behind that.
95. Yeah, probably like 95, 94.
Yeah, because cartoons and TV series take a while to get produced. People think like, oh, well, next year it's going to come out. Yeah, but they've been planning that for 2 or 3 years before that.
Even more than that. Some
Yeah.
far more than that.
Yeah. So I don't think that, it's not a knock to say that it wasn't made to be representative. And I think people try to find that in it. And that's kind of why the actors were thrown, because they were like, whoa, like we didn't think that at all.
Yeah, that wasn't the intention of the show.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being asked that like at a Comic-Con panel? Like, big part? What was that?
He's like, did he just ask if what?
Is he? Sir, I wouldn't even know how they have sex. I don't know what kind of question this is. I feel uncomfortable talking about it.
He's like, it's a children's panel.
yeah.
All the kids are like,
yeah, are you aware where we're at?
He's like, it's not even Comic-Con, it's a Chuck E. Cheese, dude. I'm with my family. Like,
right. I'm the waiter. Never mind. Now we're like,
SpongeBob got canceled. Kenny's a waiter now. But yeah,
doing it in the voice, that'd be sad.
That'd be amazing, actually.
He got fired and he's working at Chuck E. Cheese doing it like dressed
Well, yeah.
as Tom Kenny, doing it dressed as Tom Kenny in the voice of SpongeBob. Hey Tom Kenny, you think that'd be amazing?
Yeah, I think about it. Never mind. It's my mind frame right now. It's different. I'm looking at all opportunities.
I don't know if Chuck E. Cheese's pays the same. I don't think so.
I don't think so, unless you're Chucky himself.
And even then, I mean, SpongeBob. I was reading. I mean, we're talking. I think it was like, I don't have the exact figure. I don't want to lie, but I think it's like. I mean, it brings like $3.7 billion like merchandise dollars to Nickelodeon. That's huge.
Insane.
It's huge. I know it's billions with B's, but it's huge. It's huge.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Nickelodeon's got a gem on their hands with that one.
They know it.
Oh, yeah.
It's like whenever you turn it on Nickelodeon, that's all you watch. It's like turning it on USA, and I'm like, Law and Order SVU, I'll be damned. You think that's the only show on that channel? That probably
do the
is
crossover episode.
Right. Oh yeah. CSI Chicago or what is that?
Bikini Bottom.
Chicago Fire, and Chicago
Chicago
PD,
Fire.
Chicago Med, and I'm like, Olivia.
They're like, every time they do those,
they just put her anywhere.
She's
Hell, what else is on
NBC.
USA Pawn or one of those pawn shows? And they'll be like, I'm outside of Olivia Benson's garage, and like, we'll do a crossover Pawn Stars episode. They'll do anything to get her on TV.
Yeah.
Good for her.
I mean, if you got it,
Yeah. Wonder if Christopher Maloney's like, I'd like to come back.
I think that's why he came. Yeah, that's why they were like, Stabler, welcome back.
I know. He's like, do I have to go? Like, it's gonna get. He was like, I went outside and I didn't like it. Like, the grass wasn't greener at all.
It's like, in fact, there was no grass, and I didn't like what I saw.
Got a mouthful of dirt. Olivia?
Yeah.
Remember me?
He's like, I'll even be Olivia. I don't care at this point. If she wants to retire.
And then Ice-T in the background. That's about a pervert.
Like, thanks, Ice.
Yeah, thanks, Ice.
But yeah, SpongeBob is, it's definitely a force of nature in terms of shows.
Yeah. It sticks with you too. Like it was very catchy. Like everything was very catchy. Everything was very whimsical. Everything's very like even the concepts behind the episodes are super interesting.
Yeah.
Even before this recording of the show, you mentioned it.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I was like, wow, I did not expect that. So switching gears to interesting, I'm going to condense as much as I can Walt and Roy's life because this in and of itself can be like 2 episodes. But I'm giving you the highlights, folks. So if you're like, but you didn't mention the time that Walt, we all know what happened. So I am jumping forward to 1919. He wasn't born then, but this was his first job. So we are literally.
I was like,
Yeah, we're literally speeding through. He's a man at this point in 1919.
grown man.
Yeah. And he moved to Kansas City and he became a newspaper artist. And his brother Roy is the one who got him a job in an art studio where he met the cartoonist Ub Iwerks. The reason why I started there is because that's extremely important that you'll find out later. Ub Iwerks is, if Walt and Roy are that dynamic duo, Ub is like the third one in the background. Like they needed him too. But Walt and Roy already there. Roy got him the job. So then they move forward and they end up creating Laugh-O-Grams in Kansas City after Walt meets Fred Harmon. And Laugh-O-Grams was the original like Walt Disney Studios, basically. That's where they produced cartoons. They did a cartoon series called Alice in Cartoon Land, which I thought that Roger Rabbit was like one of the first times they did live action and cartoon. But all the way back in like the 20s, Alice in Cartoon Land was, because it was an actual real little girl and she was in a cartoon. So talk about a feat back then.
Who was the girl? Do you know who the little girl was?
I don't.
The actress? Okay.
No, she wasn't like Shirley Temple or anybody like that. Let's just say it was a Judy Garland-esque.
Let's just say it was Judy. Again, Hall of History. We teach you what actually happened, folks. It's Judy.
Yeah.
It was Judy. Okay.
Yeah, it was Judy.
Yeah.
But they ended up declaring bankruptcy in 1923.
It was not Judy.
It was not Judy. Yeah, and that's Judy went to go shoot Wizard of Oz after that.
Yeah.
But in 1923, him and Roy and Ub, again, this is important, moved to Hollywood and they started the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio.
They all lived together in LA. Like they all just moved there together.
They moved there together.
Wow, you really got to trust. Like, hey, I got this idea. Let's all just hitchhike away.
Yeah.
I'm sure they didn't hitchhike, but let's all just hitch out there and we'll make it work.
After we declared bankruptcy, let's all take the success train on the road. Like, but they started the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio, which later went on to Roy basically said like, hey, they're your ideas. Why don't you just call it Walt Disney Studios? Like Roy didn't even want his name on it because he was basically like, these are all your ideas. Like, you take it. So again,
I wonder if it really went down like that.
Well, from everything you see, Roy didn't want to be anything in the limelight. Like he was the financials guy. Roy, as creative as Walt was with characters, Roy was like that with the money, because they go in and out of bankruptcy throughout their time quite often, where they lose money, and Roy's always getting deals for them. So Walt is the P.T. Barnum-esque of like, come look at this, come look at that, and in the background, Roy's the one like the wizard behind the curtain.
Behind the curtain, yeah.
God Almighty. But they started that, and they made a deal with Margaret Winkler, who distributed their Alice cartoons, and they invented Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, who was actually before Mickey. And those cartoons, they were shorts, and they sold for $1,500 each back then. So $1,500 in that money. They became
Monopoly money.
Yeah, and the old Monopoly money. Remember how they were different colors? Was it doubloons? They got paid. But with shady like contracts and everything, and there was no copyright laws at that time, Margaret Winkler and Charles Mintz, who did Felix the Cat, ended up stealing Oswald because they didn't own the rights to it. So they stole Oswald, and they stole every animator except for Ub. Ub was the only one that wouldn't leave Walt. And again, back to square one. On that train ride back from New York, though, after Walt found out you had no rights to Oswald and all that, is when he started creating Mickey on the train. And originally he wanted to call him Mortimer Mouse, who did become a character later on, and they kind of like made him a sleazy character.
Was it Mortimer like a villain?
Yeah, he made him like a sleazy character, but he had like a Walt mustache, and I was like, I don't know what kind of jab this was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he would always say "ha cha cha," was his thing.
Did Walt say that?
I don't think so.
That'd be weird if he was walking through the parks like ha cha cha. Like,
I want to find that video now if that exists. But yeah, so his wife Lily is the one that said, "Why don't you call him Mickey? Mickey's a friendlier name," and Mickey's stuck. Yeah, Mortimer Mouse doesn't have the same ring. I don't know how you do the Mickey song with Mortimer. Like that's a lot longer of a song.
Mortimer, like this, the name sounds negative.
Yeah, it sounds like the bad guy in Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, or sounds like a Sims character.
Yeah, it's just good thing Lily was there.
Yeah.
And in November of 1928, Steamboat Willie debuted, which everyone knows with the little like back and forth, yeah, and the whistling. Yeah, that debuted.
I'm like,
like choo choo. It's like it was a boat. But yeah, that was the first big success they had, and it was the first one that included sound and music equipped to it. And then in that, Walt
first
was
one of
actually
theirs
the
or
voice,
first one ever?
first one of theirs.
Okay.
Walt was actually the voice of Mickey in that, and in the early cartoons, like that was actually Walt's voice that he was doing for Mickey.
Was it actually that Mickey voice, or was it like, "Hey guys"?
No, it was actually like the Mickey voice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it was like a deep voice, just Walt's voice
like,
itself.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. How we doing?
Just blowing O's like.
That's like a bird. I can't remember the cartoon from or no, the cat from Mrs. Doubtfire, where he takes a cigar out of the parakeet's mouth.
Oh yeah. And then they changed the script and all. Yeah. So Ub was the chief animator. So Ub was the one that the Mickey design that you know. Ub's the one that did that design. Walt had an original look for Mickey, and Ub's the one like, let's make him a little friendlier. So he did that. Good call on Ub's part. In 1929, though, Walt created the Silly Symphonies, and that's what would go on to introduce like Donald and Goofy and Pluto. The skeleton dance that you see sometimes throughout like Halloween, that was a Silly Symphony. Flowers and Trees was also a Silly Symphony, and it debuted in 1932, and it was the first to be produced in color, and it won an Oscar actually. And in the 30s itself, there was never a year in the whole decade that Walt didn't win an Oscar for one of his cartoons.
Wow.
Yeah, which is extremely impressive. 1937 came, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs debuted. Really big in Disney history because that was their first full-length animated film that people didn't really want to do because they didn't think it could be done. Like they didn't think people wanted to see that. Mm-hmm. And the budget at that time was $1.499 million during the Great Depression. That was their budget. But it ended up earning $8 million. So when you adjust that for inflation, that's $18.35 million they got. So, I mean, and then it would go on to gross a lot more with like re-releases and like the anniversary collection and all that. But this was all already before the 50s when Disneyland opened. He was already cranking out these hits. And the campus that they're kind of on now opened, well, not the one they open now, but the campus opened in 1939. And after that, there was an animator strike in the 1940s. And in that animator strike, that is kind of what set the tone for how Walt interacted with his cast members later on. Because there was a lot of stories that he felt so burned by the animators that he couldn't believe that he thought they were like family. So the fact that they would want to unionize and think that he wasn't treating them fairly, like it hurt him. So he really didn't get close to his animators anymore because he thought about all the animators that left him. And he's like, I do all this for them and they still want to treat me like this. And Roy's kind of the one that had to talk him down a bit and was like, listen, it's business, like calm down. Because there's a story that the guy who created Goofy, like who drew Goofy, got into a fist fight with Walt. Like at the Union picket lines. Like Walt dove over the line basically.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, Roy had to like, and then you flash forward. Yeah. Like, oh my God, here we go. And then, you flash forward to during the war, and that's when a lot of people come up with these ugly rumors about like, well, Disney was a Nazi and blah, blah, blah. He did a lot of war films for the government. He had a contract
for the German government? Films.
No, for the American, they were propaganda films and training films.
Oh.
And in that film, Donald is like with the Nazis and everything, but it's to show you like how they really are. And this little boy, but taken out of context, it looks like it was in support of it. But again, he had a contract with the government for the propaganda and the training videos and all that. So when you don't know the history behind it, people are quick to be like, "Oh, you see, it's right here in a cartoon." Like, okay, but you didn't watch the cartoon, did you? And then jumping forward, you get to Disneyland, 1955. And I think this is the time that everybody remembers Walt for, is Disneyland and all that. Because when Snow White came out, he did do Bambi, Dumbo, Pinocchio, all those later on, but they were so expensive to make, they didn't make the money back. So they were losing them money. Even though they were beautiful films, they were still losing them money. So when he was doing his like daddy-daughter days, he was sitting on the park bench and watching his girls on the carousel, and he kind of thought, like, wouldn't it be cool if I can do this with them? Like, if there was something for all of us to do together. So he started creating, this idea in his mind, and in 1952 he created WED, which just stands for Walter Elias Disney, which you're for such a creative man, like the company names, like. But that was comprised of artists and designers and everyone who kind of formulate what the park was going to be like. And then here comes Roy, save the day again. He went to ABC Studios, who at the time was a major studio. It's not like today, there weren't big studios like that. And ABC was one of the top dogs. And he made them a deal that in exchange for creating and hosting an hour-long weekly television show for Walt, they would fund the park. So he would promote it, they would get all this, and then they would help fund the park. And then way later, they go on to buy ABC, ironically. But that was good because that show allowed families with disposable income at that time, because now you're getting into the baby boomer generation, to see that this was a place that was intriguing, it was inviting, it was for the whole family. Mm-hmm. So it came at the perfect time for the perfect generation. Because that was also, again, the time of the family road trips. So it was perfect all the way around.
Station
and
wagon.
Yeah, and Disneyland officially opened July 17th, 1955. But it was full of mishaps, like we talked about in the previous amusement park episode. There was everything from counterfeit tickets people made to there was a gas leak in Fantasyland that ended up closing down Fantasyland. There was a plumber strike. There was record level heat, so the asphalt didn't cool in time, and it was a mess.
Just imagine kids like running and being like the kid, like stuck screaming.
That's
People's
part of the
sandals
experience.
melting to the people's. We tried. I think I said this in the last episode. It was like Willy Wonka, like the beginning of the Johnny Depp one, where everyone's like on fire and like the music's like.
Yeah, but you never knew it because the whole time Walt was there, it looked perfect on camera. But literally, either the minute after he left or right before he got there, all hell broke loose. And then they would go on to, within its first 10 weeks, Disneyland attracted 1 million visitors in the first 10 weeks. And by 1960, they were up to 5 million a year that they had the visitors. And again, that's a huge number for 1960. And when they opened, the admission was only $1. And ride tickets were 10 to 30 cents each. So you got to pay for each ride. But within 4 months, they changed that. And it was $2.50 for a ticket. And it included 8 attractions. So
you had to pay after that, or was there only 8 to 10 attractions period in the park?
There was really only like 8 to 10 attractions period. So it's basically what it is now, but for $2.50.
Oh, I think it meant it's like $2.50 now. I was like, on what planet, sir?
No, you moved the decimal maybe.
Yeah.
But that success kind of is what catapulted him to want to do Disney World. In the 60s and the 70s. And in the 60s, him and Roy began looking at huge plots of land here in Florida for what Walt was planning on calling the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, or Epcot, as we all know. And that was far different from the park. So in mid-1960s, what he wanted to do was actually build a community where the people lived and they worked together and they shared their ideas, kind of like Hershey, Pennsylvania is. Like that was like where the people worked and everything. He kind of wanted that, but magnified. But in 1966, Walt Disney died from lung cancer. And while he was in his room, Roy was there with him, and the story goes that Walt was explaining onto the ceiling what he envisioned and what he wanted it to look like, and Roy just kind of processed it all and told him like he was going to do it for him. And Roy became the chairman, CEO, and president of the company at that time, and he oversaw all of the construction and the completion of Walt Disney World. But without Walt, that real vision he had for Epcot didn't materialize. So it is what you see now with all the countries and all that, but it's not that community that he wanted it to be. But then sadly, Roy Disney passed away in December of 1971, and that's 3 months after Magic Kingdom opened here in Orlando. So he didn't even see Epcot be built. And then after that, I believe Disney's son-in-law took over the company for a while, and then Roy's son took over the company after that. So it stayed in the family for quite some time. And then it became publicly traded, where you see like Michael Eisner stepped in and Bob Iger came in and all that. But as you see, like through their history, Walt had these like grandiose ideas, but Roy was always the guy who was like, I'm going to back your plan financially the best I can. I'll go to every bank who will listen to me. I'll go anywhere. Yeah, because again, they were in such debt with their movies, and still Roy found a way to get funding because his brother had a dream. How?
That's crazy.
Like, for me, that'd be humiliating to be like, I know I don't have any money right now, but you got to trust me on this.
But I promise. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
I got a great deal for you.
I have no collateral, but my brother has a dream, and by damn, I'm going to make it happen. I mean, so much so that they were talking about sometimes Roy would have Walt come into the meeting, like midway through, and he'd be like, Walt, explain to him what you want to do. And Walt would like act out the movie he wanted to do, or he would act out the princesses and the scenes. And the banker was just like, you touched my heart. Like he just gave him the money back then.
All right, let me just, my personal money, or like, no, sir, we need a loan.
Yeah, you try that now. The banks don't care.
No.
Let's go to John Q for how healthcare and banks care about you. In fast forward to 2000s.
Right.
So
good luck.
But yeah, at that time they were the dynamic duo that, it's not an understatement to say, completely changed the world. They reshaped everything. Entertainment. No one has more Oscar wins than Walt Disney. And that's huge.
Yeah. We want to hear from you guys. Who are some of your guys' favorite dynamic duos? If you guys have them in your life, I hope that you
Is
do.
it us?
Yeah, is it us? But make sure that you subscribe, like this video, dislike it if you didn't like it. But as always, the links to all of our social media accounts will be in the description box below. So thank you guys so much for tuning in this week.
And we also have our water cooler series. It's only on YouTube. So you can only see those, not hear them in the audio versions, which can be found on Pandora, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, not Google Play.
Yeah, not Google Play, but everything else.
Everything else. You can find us. But that will do it for us on this week's Hall of History. As always, he's been Anthony, I've been Carlos, and remember, sometimes you just need that other person to believe. Until next time.